The champagne glass trembled in my 72-year-old hand as I stood before 300 wedding guests, the microphone cold against my palm, my daughter's face frozen in horror across the flower-draped ballroom. This was it. The moment 8 years of silence would finally, devastatingly speak. My hands, gnarled and spotted with age like fallen leaves pressed between the pages of time, gripped the microphone stand. These weren't the soft, manicured hands of women who lunched at country clubs. No, mine told a different story. 47 years of scrubbing other people's floors after Richard died, of counting pennies at grocery store checkouts while my own children drove past in luxury cars I'd helped them afford, of folding myself smaller and smaller until I became what they always wanted. Invisible, convenient, disposable. I'd built a fortress of silence over those 8 years, brick by brick. Each unanswered phone call another layer of mortar sealing me away from a world that had decided I no longer mattered. It wasn't a dramatic exodus, no tearful goodbyes or slammed doors. Just a slow, insidious drift, like watching the tide pull away from shore, grain by grain, until one day you look up and the beach you knew has vanished entirely. My 65th birthday passed without a card. Then my 66th. By the time I turned 70, I'd stopped checking the mailbox with that pathetic flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone remembered I existed. The abandonment wasn't clean, you see. That would have been kinder. Instead, it was a death by 1,000 paper cuts, texts left unread, invitations to Thanksgiving that somehow got lost in the mail, grandchildren who forgot my name because their parents never spoke it. I became a ghost haunting my own life, a shadow that flickered at the edges of their family photos, cropped out before posting to social media. Each forgotten moment catalogued itself in my bones, settling like sediment at the bottom of a river, layer upon silent layer of proof that I'd become the family's shameful secret, their uncomfortable reminder of obligation they no longer wished to fulfill. Before I continue my story, I'd like to know who's on the other side listening to me. Comment your name and where you're watching from. And check if you're already subscribed to the channel. It really helps me continue bringing these real stories to you. Write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. How did I end up here, microphone in hand, about to detonate my daughter's perfect wedding? It started exactly 11 days ago when my phone rang for the first time in 8 years. I was in my cramped studio apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place where the radiator clanks all night like chains dragging across concrete and the neighbors' arguments seep through walls thin as tissue paper. The phone's ring shattered the silence I'd grown accustomed to, a sound so foreign it took me 3 rings to remember what it meant. My daughter Jennifer's name glowed on the screen like an accusation. Mom! Her voice dripped with honey that couldn't quite mask the vinegar underneath. I know it's been a while, but Robert and I are getting married in 2 weeks, and it would mean everything if you'd come. Family is so important, you know. Family. The word tasted like ashes in my mouth. But I said yes. Of course I said yes. Because even after 8 years of silence, even after they'd ghosted me completely following Richard's funeral, some pathetic part of me still hoped, still believed blood meant something. 3 days later, I sat in Jennifer's sprawling suburban home, the one I'd helped with the down payment before they cut me off, watching her flip through seating charts with manicured nails that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her voice floated around me, talking about flower arrangements and photographers, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching her. That's when I saw it. On her desk, half hidden under wedding invitations printed on expensive cardstock, was a folder. My name typed across the tab. Margaret's assets, final transfer. My heart didn't race. Stop. Then started again, slower, colder. Mom, could you be a dear and grab my phone from the kitchen? Jennifer asked, not looking up from her planning binder. The moment she said it, something in her voice, too casual, too calculated, made the hair on my neck rise. I stood slowly, my arthritic knees protesting, and walked toward the kitchen. But I didn't go all the way. I stopped just beyond the doorway, hidden by the wall, close enough to hear. Jennifer's whisper carried through the house like poison gas. Is she signing? The lawyer said once she signs the power of attorney, we can liquidate everything. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She's pathetic, really. Desperate for attention. 2 weeks and it's done. Then we never have to pretend to care again. And that's how I ended up here, standing at this microphone. The weight of discovery pressing against my chest like a boulder I'd been carrying uphill for 11 days. The ballroom's crystal chandelier cast fractured light across hundreds of faces turned toward me. Jennifer's friends, her new in-laws, distant relatives who'd also forgotten my existence. My son Marcus sat at the head table, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror as he realized this wasn't going to be a sweet grandmother of the bride toast. I'd spent 8 years learning to be small. 8 years practicing invisibility until it became my superpower. They never saw me coming. Let me take you back further, though, because this story doesn't really start 11 days ago. It starts 8 years, 2 months and 13 days ago, at Richard's funeral, when everything I thought I knew about my family shattered like glass under a hammer. My husband Richard and I built our lives together brick by brick over 43 years of marriage. He was a good man. Not perfect but steady, kind, the kind of man who remembered anniversaries and still held doors open even when his back ached. We ran a small but successful property management company, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills and then some. We had 2 children. Jennifer, our meticulous daughter who inherited her father's head for numbers, and Marcus, our charming son who could sell ice to Eskimos. Richard's death wasn't dramatic. No car crash or sudden heart attack. Just a slow fade. Cancer that ate away at him cell by cell while I held his hand and pretended to be strong. The funeral was lovely, if you can call any funeral lovely. White roses everywhere because they were his favorite. The whole family gathered, solemn and supportive. Or so I thought. The reading of the will happened 3 days after we buried him. I sat in the lawyer's office, still numb with grief, wearing the same black dress I'd worn to the funeral because I hadn't had the energy to change. Jennifer and Marcus sat across from me, their faces appropriately somber. Mr. Thornton, Richard's lawyer for 20 years, cleared his throat. Mrs. Patterson, I'm afraid there's been some confusion. Your husband's will has been updated significantly from the version you both signed together 5 years ago. My hands went cold. Updated. Richard never mentioned. According to this document signed 8 months before his death, the business assets and primary residence are to be divided equally between your children, Jennifer and Marcus. You're to receive a modest monthly stipend of $2,000 and can remain in the family home for 1 year, after which it will be sold. The room tilted. $2,000. Our business generated $15,000 a month in revenue. Our house was worth $800,000, and I was getting $2,000 a month. There must be a mistake, I whispered. Richard would never. I assure you, everything is legal and properly executed. Mr. Thornton's voice carried a note of discomfort, like he was reading a script he didn't quite believe. I looked at Jennifer, Marcus, waiting for them to be as shocked as I was. Waiting for them to demand this be corrected. Instead, Jennifer reached across the table and patted my hand with all the warmth of a snake sizing up prey. We'll take care of you, Mom. Don't worry. Family takes care of family. That phrase. Family takes care of family. I would hear it 17 more times over the next 2 months, always right before they took something else away. The first month after Richard died, they were attentive. Jennifer called twice a week. Marcus stopped by with groceries. I thought, despite the shock of the will, that maybe we'd be okay. That maybe Richard had his reasons for the strange arrangement, and my children would honor the spirit of our family even if the letter of the law said otherwise. Then the calls started spacing out. Once a week. Once every 2 weeks. By month 3, silence. I called Jennifer on her birthday. Voicemail. I texted Marcus about Thanksgiving plans. Read but never answered. I sent Christmas cards to my grandchildren, Jennifer's twins, Emma and Sophie, who I'd babysat every weekend for 6 years. The cards came back marked "Return to Sender." By my 65th birthday, 6 months after Richard's death, I understood. I'd been erased. The house sold exactly 1 year after the funeral, just as the will specified. Jennifer handled everything through her lawyer. I wasn't consulted on the price, the buyers, the closing date. I received a text. House closes Friday. You'll need to be out by Thursday. We'll send movers for your things. They sent movers, all right. 2 guys with a truck who gave me 4 hours to separate 43 years of memories into keep and donate piles. Most of it went to Goodwill. I kept what fit in the studio apartment I'd found in the cheapest part of town, the place where radiators clank and arguments seep through walls. My children took everything else. And I mean everything. Richard's watch collection that his father had given him. My grandmother's china that was supposed to go to Jennifer. Photo albums from the children's childhoods. Even the wedding gifts we'd received 4 decades ago. All of it liquidated, sold, divided between them while I got silence. The $2,000 monthly stipend barely covered rent, utilities and food. I got a job cleaning houses. Ironic, wasn't it? Spending my 70s scrubbing toilets in mansions while my own children lived in luxury funded by the business their father and I built together. But you want to know the worst part? It wasn't the money. It wasn't even the house. It was Thanksgiving year 2 after Richard's death. I'd heard through a neighbor, because of course I heard through a neighbor, not from my own family, that Jennifer was hosting Thanksgiving. The whole family would be there. Marcus and his wife. The grandchildren. Everyone except me. I drove past Jennifer's house that evening, my ancient Honda sputtering asthmatically as I parked 3 houses down where they wouldn't see me. Through the glowing windows I could see them. All of them. Laughing around a table laden with turkey and stuffing and all the trimmings. My grandchildren bigger now, faces I barely recognized. Marcus carving the turkey like Richard used to do. And Jennifer, raising a glass and a toast to something I couldn't hear but could imagine. Family. Gratitude. Being together. I sat in that car for 2 hours, watching my family celebrate without me, and something inside me calcified. Hardened. The soft, hopeful parts that had believed in redemption and reconciliation fossilized into something cold and patient and quietly furious. I drove home to my studio apartment, ate a lean cuisine in front of the television, and made a decision. If they wanted me gone, I'd be gone. But I wouldn't disappear quietly. I'd disappear strategically. For the next 6 years, I became a ghost. I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped reaching out. If they wanted silence, I'd give them silence so complete they'd forget I ever existed. But ghosts, I learned, can move through walls. They can see things the living don't think to hide. Year 3 I started digging. It started innocently enough. I couldn't sleep one night, and I was going through old financial documents, trying to figure out how to stretch my meager stipend to cover a dental emergency. That's when I found it. A copy of Richard's original will, the one we'd signed together, tucked into a folder of old tax returns I'd salvaged from the house purge. In that original will, everything was split evenly. 50% to me, 25% each to Jennifer and Marcus. The business would remain mine to run or sell as I saw fit. The house was mine for life. So what happened? I spent 4 months and most of my cleaning job earnings hiring a private investigator. A retired police detective named Frank Chan who worked out of a cramped office above a bail bondsman. Frank was thorough. Expensive but thorough. What he found made my blood run cold. 8 months before Richard died, when he was already sick, already weak, already confused from pain medication, Jennifer and Marcus had taken him to a new lawyer. Not Mr. Thornton, who'd handled our affairs for 20 years. A new lawyer. A younger man who owed Marcus a favor from a real estate deal. They'd convinced Richard, in his compromised state, to sign a new will. Told him it was just updating beneficiary paperwork. Richard, trusting his children implicitly, signed. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Frank found bank records. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Starting 6 months before Richard's death and continuing for 3 years after. Regular transfers from our business account to accounts in Jennifer's and Marcus's names. Not huge amounts, just enough to fly under the radar. 5,000 here. 10,000 there. Over 5 years, they'd siphoned off nearly $500,000. My children hadn't just inherited the family business. They'd been systematically looting it while their father was dying, and then they'd erased me from the will to cover their tracks. The documentation sat in a manila folder in my apartment for 2 years. I looked at it sometimes, late at night when the radiator clanked and sleep wouldn't come. I'd trace the bank transfer records with one arthritic finger and imagine confronting them. Imagine their faces when I presented the evidence. Imagine justice. But I didn't do anything. Not yet. 'Cause I was waiting. I'm 72 years old. I've learned that patience isn't passive, it's tactical. And after 7 decades on this earth, watching, learning, surviving, I knew one truth. Revenge is a dish best served when your enemy has the most to lose. So I waited. And then, exactly 8 years and 1 month after Richard's funeral, I bought a lottery ticket. I don't usually play the lottery. It's a fool's tax, Richard used to say. A poverty trap for people who don't understand mathematics. But it was my 72nd birthday, and I was feeling particularly invisible that day. Even the cashier at the grocery store had looked right through me while scanning my items, and something defiant flared up in my chest. $2. Powerball. Random numbers. I tucked the ticket into my wallet and forgot about it. 4 days later I was cleaning Mrs. Henderson's guest bathroom. She was a lawyer's wife who treated me like ambulatory furniture. When my phone buzzed. A news alert. Record Powerball jackpot winner in local area. $10 million prize. I almost didn't check my ticket. Almost threw it away with the grocery receipts and old coupons cluttering my purse. But something made me pull it out. Made me compare the numbers on that crumpled slip of paper to the numbers glowing on my phone screen. One number matched. Then another. Then another. All 6. I sat down on Mrs. Henderson's imported Italian tile floor, my rubber gloves still dripping bleach water, and stared at that ticket for probably 20 minutes. $10 million. After taxes, roughly $6 million. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't call anyone. I just sat there thinking about what this meant. What it could mean. Then I called Frank Chen. I need you to keep digging, I told him. I need everything. Every transfer, every document, every piece of evidence that proves what they did. And I need it airtight. That'll cost. Money isn't an object anymore. Frank was quiet for a moment. Then, you win the lottery or something. Something like that. I claimed the prize anonymously. Fortunately, my state allowed it, and set up a trust with a lawyer Frank recommended. Someone who dealt with complex financial fraud cases. Someone who knew how to build an ironclad case. For 3 months, I didn't tell anyone about the money. I kept living in my studio apartment. Kept cleaning houses. Kept being invisible. But now I had resources. And Frank went to work. He found everything. Email chains between Jennifer and Marcus discussing how to handle Mom after Richard died. Text messages about liquidating her assets and minimizing her portion. Proof that they'd pressured Richard to sign the new will while he was heavily medicated. Bank statements showing they'd been embezzling from the business for years, even before Richard got sick. And then Frank found something else. Something that changed everything. A recorded conversation. Marcus had pocket-dialed Frank accidentally during one of Frank's surveillance operations, where Marcus and Jennifer discussed their long-term plan. It wasn't just about the money, they said. It was about finally being free of the burden. That's what Marcus called me. Burden. Jennifer had laughed. She'll be dead in 10 years anyway. Easier to cut her off now than keep up the charade. I listened to that recording 17 times. Each time the words cut deeper, until I was bleeding from wounds I didn't even know existed. My children wanted me dead. Or close enough to it. Erased. Forgotten. And they were willing to commit financial fraud and elder abuse to make it happen. I made copies of everything. Gave one set to my lawyer. Put another in a safe deposit box. Kept a third set in my apartment. Hidden inside a hollowed-out book. Richard's favorite Hemingway novel. The one thing they'd let me keep because it had no resale value. Then I waited some more. 8 months after winning the lottery, my phone rang. Jennifer's name on the screen, calling for the first time in 8 years. Mom. I know it's been a while. And I knew. They'd heard somehow. Probably through the gossip mill. A small town lottery winners, eventually someone talks. They didn't know it was me for sure, but they suspected. And suddenly, after 8 years of silence, they wanted back in. Could have hung up. Could have told them to go to hell. Instead, I said yes to the wedding invitation. Because I'd been waiting 8 years for the perfect moment to destroy them. And Jennifer had just handed it to me on a silver platter. If you're following me this far, leave a comment and tell me. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Your story matters to me. I want to read about it in the comments. The 11 days between that phone call and the wedding were the longest and shortest of my life. Jennifer invited me to lunch. Marcus stopped by my apartment with flowers and apologies that tasted like ash. We've been terrible, he said. His practiced salesman smile not quite reaching his calculating eyes. Life got so busy, you know. But family is everything. We want to make it right. He nodded. Smile. Played the role of desperate, grateful mother so well I almost convinced myself. They brought legal documents. Just updating some paperwork, Jennifer said breezily. Power of attorney. Access to my accounts. For emergencies, she assured me. So we can help if you need anything. I signed everything. Made copies for them. Watched their relief bloom like poison flowers. What they didn't know. Every document they gave me went straight to my lawyer. Every conversation was recorded on the small device Frank had given me. Hidden in the pendant necklace I wore. The one piece of jewelry I still owned, Richard's last birthday gift to me. The night before the wedding I couldn't sleep. Not from nerves but from anticipation. I sat in my studio apartment, looking at the folder of evidence one last time. Bank statements, email printouts, text message screenshots, legal documents showing the fraud. Frank's investigative report, 93 pages long. 8 years of silence, compressed into 93 pages of proof. I thought about Richard. About how he'd feel if he knew what his children had done. The betrayal would have killed him faster than the cancer. Maybe that was a mercy. I thought about my grandchildren, Emma and Sophie, now 13 years old. They wouldn't remember me. Their mother had erased me from their lives so completely I was less than a stranger. I was a ghost they'd never even known existed. I thought about all those Thanksgivings I'd spent alone. All those birthdays without cards. All those nights when the loneliness felt like a physical weight crushing my chest. And I packed the evidence folder into my best handbag, a worn leather thing from 1987 that somehow still held together, and laid out my dress for the wedding. Not black. I'd worn black to Richard's funeral. This time I chose deep burgundy. The color of wine. The color of justice. The wedding was absurdly lavish. Jennifer had always been excessive, but this was beyond anything I'd imagined. Held at the Riverside Country Club, the same place she'd held her Sweet 16, back when I could afford such luxuries. Flowers everywhere. Roses, peonies, hydrangeas, probably $30,000 worth. A string quartet playing Vivaldi. Ice sculptures melting slowly in the May heat. 300 guests. I knew maybe 15 of them. I sat in the back during the ceremony, watching Jennifer walk down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my annual rent. She looked beautiful, radiant. Every inch the successful daughter who'd pulled herself up by her bootstraps, built a life through hard work and determination. Except it wasn't her bootstraps. It was her father's business. Her mother's inheritance. Money stolen and hoarded while I scrubbed toilets to survive. The reception was even more elaborate. Dinner was a 4-course meal with wine pairings. Speeches were scheduled between courses. Marcus gave a best man toast that had everyone laughing, telling charming stories about Jennifer's childhood that conveniently edited me out of every memory. Then came the father-daughter dance. Except Jennifer didn't have a father anymore, so she danced with Marcus instead, and I watched from my table in the back corner, where they'd seated me naturally, as far from the family as possible without technically excluding me, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. When the dance ended, I stood up. My knees protested, arthritic and angry, but I ignored them. I walked to the bandleader, whispered my request. His eyebrows rose, but he nodded. The microphone appeared in my hand. "Excuse me," I said. My voice carried across the ballroom, amplified and impossible to ignore. "I'd like to say a few words." Jennifer's face went white. Marcus started to stand, but his wife grabbed his arm, confused about what was happening. I walked to the center of the room, positioned myself so everyone could see me clearly. The grandmother. The ghost. The woman they'd tried to erase. "For those who don't know me," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I'm Margaret Patterson, Jennifer's mother, Marcus's mother. And for the past 8 years, I've been invisible to my own family." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jennifer stood up, her face a mask of forced calm. "Mom, this isn't the time." "Actually, Jennifer, this is exactly the time." I opened my handbag, pulled out the folder. "You see, I've learned something interesting about the universe. It doesn't forget, even when people want you to." I turned to address the room, making eye contact with as many guests as possible. "My husband Richard died 8 years ago. He was a good man. We built a successful property management business together. We had a beautiful home. We planned for our children to inherit everything, together equally as a family." My voice didn't waver. 8 years of practice being invisible had taught me how to speak when it mattered. But 3 days after Richard's funeral, I learned that his will had been changed. Changed by my children, who convinced their dying, medicated father to sign documents he didn't understand. Documents that gave them everything and left me with essentially nothing. The murmurs grew louder. I saw some of Jennifer's friends looking at her with dawning confusion. Saw Marcus's face go from white to red. "For 8 years I've lived in a studio apartment, working as a housekeeper to survive. My children, these people you're celebrating today, took everything. The house, the business, my husband's belongings. They took it all, and then they took something even more valuable. They erased me. No calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that I existed." Jennifer was crying now, but they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of fury, of humiliation, of a plan unraveling in real time. And then, 3 weeks ago, after 8 years of total silence, they called. Suddenly they wanted to reconnect. Suddenly family mattered again. And do you know why? I pulled out the first document from my folder. A printout of the lottery announcement. Because they heard rumors that someone in our town had won $10 million. And they suspected it might be me. Guess now. Real, audible gasps from the assembled guests. They were right, by the way. I did win. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know because they'd written me off as a pathetic old woman too stupid to fight back, is that I've spent the last 8 years documenting everything they did. I held up the folder like a prosecutor presenting evidence. Bank records showing they embezzled nearly $500,000 from the family business. Email chains discussing how to handle mom and minimize her cut. Text messages referring to me as the burden they needed to eliminate. Recorded conversations where they literally discussed waiting for me to die so they wouldn't have to keep up this charade of caring. The room was dead silent now. You could hear the ice sculptures melting, water dripping onto linen tablecloths. They forged documents, manipulated a dying man, committed elder abuse and financial fraud. And they did it all because they were greedy. Because money mattered more than their mother. More than their father's wishes. More than basic human decency. Marcus finally found his voice. "This is insane, you're making this up." "Am I?" I pulled out another document. Because I have 9 years of bank statements that say otherwise. I have emails from your personal accounts. I have recorded conversations. And I have a lawyer who's been building a case against both of you for the past 8 months. I turned back to the guests, many of whom were looking at Jennifer and Marcus with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. "I didn't come here for money. Have money now. I came here because you wanted to rob me one more time. Because you saw an opportunity to get power of attorney, to access my lottery winnings, to finish what you started 8 years ago. And I came here to make sure everyone in your life knows exactly who you are. I held up the folder one more time. I've already filed a lawsuit. Elder abuse. Financial fraud. Will tampering. My lawyer estimates you'll each face at least 5 years in prison if convicted. And you'll lose everything, the business, the houses, all the money you stole. Every penny. Jennifer was sobbing openly now. Marcus looked like he might vomit. Around them, guests were standing, gathering their things, looking at them with a kind of disgust usually reserved for predators and traitors. But more than that, I said quietly, letting the microphone catch every word. You'll lose what you valued most, your reputations. Your standing. The carefully constructed image of successful, loving children. Everyone will know what you did. Everyone will know your frauds. I set the microphone down on the nearest table with a soft thump that somehow felt louder than shouting. Enjoy the rest of your wedding, Jennifer. It's the last celebration you'll have for a very long time. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, my handbag clutched against my side, and the sound of 300 conversations exploding behind me like fireworks. The legal proceedings took 18 months. My lawyer, a brilliant woman named Sandra Chen, Frank's sister as it turned out, built a case so airtight that Marcus and Jennifer's lawyers recommended they take a plea deal within 6 months. They fought it, of course. Spent a fortune on legal defense, draining the business accounts they'd worked so hard to steal. In the end, they each pled guilty to elder abuse and financial fraud. Jennifer got 4 years in minimum security. Marcus got 5. They were each ordered to pay restitution, every penny they'd stolen plus interest plus legal fees. The family business was liquidated to pay their debts. The houses they'd bought with embezzled money were seized. Their bank accounts were frozen and emptied. They lost everything. I didn't take joy in it. That's not what this was about. When the judge read the sentence, I didn't smile or celebrate. Just felt quiet, settled, like a bone that had been broken for 8 years finally setting back into place. The money they repaid went directly into a trust I'd established for my grandchildren, Emma and Sophie. They'd need it with their parents in prison. I tried to reach out to them, but their other grandmother, Jennifer's mother-in-law, had custody now, and she'd made it clear I wasn't welcome. The poison of what I'd done to her daughter-in-law was too bitter. Understood. Maybe when they're older, they'll want to know my side. Maybe not. Either way, the money will be there for college, for starting their lives, for whatever they need. I moved out of the studio apartment. Not to anywhere fancy. Just a modest 2-bedroom house on the quiet side of town with a garden where I can grow tomatoes and roses. I still work, though not cleaning houses anymore. I volunteer at the senior center, teaching older adults how to navigate technology and recognize financial scams. I've become something of an advocate, actually, for elder abuse prevention. I speak at community centers and church groups, telling my story, helping other elderly people recognize the warning signs before it's too late. Sometimes late at night I think about Jennifer and Marcus. Wonder if they understand what they did. Wonder if they've learned anything. Wonder if, somewhere in those prison cells, they ever think about the mother they threw away like garbage. But mostly I don't think about them at all. I think about Richard and how proud he'd be that I fought back. I think about the garden I'm planning for spring. I think about the book club I joined where nobody knows my history, and I'm just Margaret, the woman who always brings homemade cookies and has strong opinions about Russian literature. I think about the fact that I'm 73 now, and I finally feel visible again. Not to my children. They'll never see me. But to myself. And after 8 years of being a ghost, that's more than enough. The chandelier lights in that ballroom, fractured and glittering, had illuminated more than just a wedding. They'd exposed a truth I'd spent years excavating from the wreckage of my life. Justice doesn't always look like what you expect. It's not always sweet. It's not always satisfying in the way movies promise. But it's real. And sometimes real is enough. I learned something in those 8 years of silence, something I wish I'd known earlier. Betrayal doesn't destroy you. Letting it define you does. I could have spent my 70s bitter and broken, carrying that folder of evidence like a talisman of pain. Instead, I used it. transformed it, made it into something that protected not just me, but potentially countless other elderly people who might face what I faced. That's the thing about getting older that nobody tells you. You accumulate more than just wrinkles and arthritis. You accumulate perspective, the ability to see long games, the patience to wait for the exact right moment. Young people rush toward justice with fury and passion. Old people, we plan, we strategize. We understand that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about accountability. Did I go too far? That's the question I ask myself sometimes, when the house is quiet and the ghosts of what-ifs come knocking. Should I have tried family therapy instead of public humiliation? Should I have confronted them privately rather than at the wedding? But then I remember the recording. Marcus's laugh. Jennifer's casual cruelty. She'll be dead in 10 years anyway. And I remember why I did what I did. Not for revenge. For survival. For the next elderly parent who might be sitting in a studio apartment right now, wondering if they imagined their children's betrayal. Wondering if they're being too sensitive. Wondering if they deserve the silence. They don't. Nobody does. So I ask you now, whoever you are on the other side of this story. Have you ever discovered that the people who should love you most actually wanted you gone? Have you ever had to choose between family and justice, knowing you can't have both? Have you ever been betrayed so profoundly that it changed who you fundamentally are? And if you have, if you're going through it right now, what would you do? Would you forgive? Would you fight? Would you disappear? Or would you make them see you one last time before you go? I made my choice. I stood in that ballroom and refused to be invisible anymore. I burned every bridge to a family that had already abandoned me, and I'd do it again. But I'm 73 years old, and I've learned that every choice is both victory and loss. I won justice. I lost my children forever. Some days I'm not sure which weighs more. Thank you for listening to my story until the end. This is a true story. A real person who went through an extreme situation and found the strength to move forward. If this story touched you in any way, please subscribe to the channel. I post real stories of overcoming adversity, revenge, and justice every week here. And tell me in the comments. Have you lived through something similar? What would you have done in my place? I love reading your stories too. Click on the videos appearing on the screen now for more emotional stories that will make you reflect. Until the next story.